Welcome to Train Signal. You're watching Designing Trust Between Forests and Domains. How to make sure somebody else from somewhere else can share stuff. In this video, we're going to start off by talking about what are trusts and why you will eventually care, because you will. And that's probably more a review for you there. We're also going to review the types of trusts. I just want to make sure that these are all cemented in your mind. Then we're going to talk about some rules of engagement, just some basic guidelines for designing and building trusts, things that you're going to want to remember when this comes up. Then we're going to go through an example scenario where Globomantics is actually going to buy out a small company over in Japan called Verde Petra. So we'll go through that example and I'll give you a quick demo on how to create a trust. So let's start off by talking about, again, what are trusts and why you're going to eventually care. Trusts can allow you to have users from other domains have access to your stuff and vice versa if you want to, that is. You're going to need to have trust when your company buys another company and you have to integrate the two networks quickly. You're going to also need them if you partner with another company and you need to share information. And I mean share information, I'm talking a lot of information. Especially if you're in software development, sharing code base back and forth is going to be pretty critical for you. Now, before we get too hot and heavy into this topic, I do want to mention to you that Active Directory Federation services, along with SharePoint Server or SharePoint Services, can also provide you a solution that will allow you to share information quickly and easily between domains. So that's also an additional option just in case trusts aren't going to be a viable way to get that done. So I just want to throw that in there. But in case you do need to implement trusts, really the question with trust is who are you going to trust or who will trust who and how? So we're going to get into the types of trusts so you can see what is possible and what the potentials are for trust relationships. So let's start off with a one-way domain trust, all right? Here's the way that this is going to work. Let's say that Globomantics domain trusts the Verde Petra domain. Let's say that we have two shared folders, one over here for Globomantics and one for Verde Petra. So let's call the blue guy Sam. Sam will be over here in Globomantics, and let's say that Bill is over here in Verde Petra. Now, if Globomantics trusts Verde Petra, here's the deal. Users from Verde Petra can have access to Globomantics shared stuff, like shared printers, shared folders, etc. We can actually create permissions, and you already know about permissions in terms of folders and such. But Globomantics users will not have access to shares or resources in Verde Petra. So if Sam wants to get access over here to Verde Petra, that's not going to work because Verde Petra does not trust Globomantics. However, if Bill wants to get access to stuff that Sam has in a shared folder and that Sam or the administrator has provided Bill permissions on that folder for, that's going to be possible and it should actually work. Now, in order to set up this kind of trust where Globomantics trusts Verde Petra but not the other way around, if we're setting up the trust in Globomantics, let me take you over here to my little screenshot. We're actually going to be creating a one-way outgoing trust. Okay, I'm going to put a little dot here on this one. And you'll notice here that users in the specified domain, realm, or forest can be authenticated in this domain and thus have access to whatever shared resources or folders that that particular user has permissions for. Now, let's flip this on the other side. Let's talk about the opposite type of trust where Verde Petra trusts Globomantics. It's really pretty much the exact opposite. If Sam has a shared folder and Bill has a shared folder, in this instance, Sam gets access to stuff that Bill has over here in his shared folder. However, Bill does not get access to Sam's folder. So it's really just the opposite in this instance. Users from Globomantics get access to stuff over in Verde Petra. However, users in Verde Petra do not get access to stuff in Globomantics. Now, if we're over here in Globomantics, what we would do is, in this example, we would set up a one-way incoming trust where users in this domain can be authenticated in the specified domain, realm, or forest. Now, of course, if we were setting up this kind of trust, an administrator for Verde Petra would also have to accept the trust. And also in our previous example, an administrator over in Globomantics would have to accept the trust. So they still have to be set up on both sides of the domain, regardless of what direction these guys are trusting. All right? So let's go ahead and let's talk about a two-way domain trust now. Both domains trust each other, and in this instance, Bill is going to get access to stuff over in Globomantics that he has permissions for, and Sam will get access to stuff over in Verde Petra he has access permissions for. So in this instance, if they both have shared folders and they want to quickly and easily share information back and forth in a two-way domain trust, all we have to do is make sure that the appropriate permissions are on the file folders. Now we would create a two-way trust. Let's put a little red mark in here. And the two-way trust would have to be started in either of the domains, but also have to be accepted in both domains. All right. So again, you're going to have to do a little bit of work on both sides of the trust relationship. When we're talking about trust, I mean, we're really talking about trust in a very literal sense. Do we trust this other domain? Do we trust the users in the domain? Do both users and do both administrators in both domains trust each other? That's really going to be the big question. But now that we've gone through the three basic kinds of trust that you're going to see in the wizard, let's talk a little bit about child domains, okay? If both domains do trust each other, and Bill can get access to stuff that Sam has, and Sam can get access to stuff that Bill has, all right, that's a beautiful thing. However, what about Sally and Dina down here, okay? Let's say that Sally wants to get access to stuff that Dina has in a shared folder. Maybe it's a sales document or human resources document or whatever it may be, and vice versa. Let's say that Dina wants to get access to stuff that Sally has. Now, even if your two top-level domains trust each other, that does not necessarily mean that your child domains trust each other, okay? If this is the scenario that we find ourselves in, then we have to make sure that our trusts are actually what we call transitive, okay? Now, a transitive trust allows users to share information back and forth between not only just the top-level domains, as we see up here, but also in child domains. So, for example, let's say that Globomantics and Verde Petra both trust each other. Let's say it's a two-way domain trust. If that trust is transitive, then let's say that Dina down here in tk.verdepetra.com, well, whenever you have a child domain, it's going to intrinsically trust, if you don't set up anything different, it's going to intrinsically trust its parent domain. So if TK Verde Petra trusts verdepetra.com, and verdepetra.com trusts globomantics.com, and sw.globomantics.com also trusts globomantics.com, then by the properties of transitivity, tk.verdepetra.com and sw.globomantics.com trust each other. So now Dina can get access to stuff that Sally has, as long as Dina has permissions on the folder, and vice versa. And by the way, a transitive trust is the default when you're creating trusts. So if you do not want Dina or Sally to have access to each other's stuff, then you need to make sure that you do not create a transitive trust. Okay? So big things to keep in mind as you're looking at designing a trust relationship. Let's talk about forest trusts now. A forest trust, however, it does allow for child domains in both forests to trust each other. Now when we're talking about forests, of course, we're talking about the whole kit and caboodle, all the domains that belong to a particular forest root domain. So if both forests trust each other, both Sam and Bill can get access to each other's stuff, documents, and or whatever happens to be in that shared file folder. Along with Sally and Dina down here, they can both get access, assuming that the proper permissions have been placed on those shared folders. Now, a forest trust is transitive by default, by its very nature. So if you want to do a two-way domain trust and you want to make it transitive, I mean, that's one way to get it done, but you can also trust the entire forest worth of domains and get that same level of flexibility and ability to share information, whether it be shared file folders, as we've talked about here, or shared printers, or whatever device it may be. A forest trust can be a bit of a no-brainer. It's not an end-all, be-all fix, though, just so you know. When security is a big issue, you may want to consider one-way trusts, or maybe even a non-transitive domain-level trust. All right, so we've gotten forest trusts down. Let's go ahead and let's talk about shortcut trusts now. Let's say that we have a two-way transitive domain level trust. And let's say that everybody has access to, or at least the ability to have access to, shared folders and whatnot. Let's say that Sally is trying to get access to a shared file folder. Let's say that it's a sales document over here from Dina's shared folder. Let's say it's taking forever for that to happen. Well, especially when you're talking about child domains, authentication may be a little bit slow. So what we can do in order to fix that time lapse in terms of being able to access each other's stuff, what we can do is we can create what we call a shortcut trust. Now, even though the trust might be available and that trust might be transitive, a shortcut trust actually simply speeds up the process of authenticating users from other domains, granting them access. So a shortcut trust, the whole purpose of it is rather than have security in mind, this is really for the user experience. You want your users to be able to access each other's stuff across domains quickly and easily. So a shortcut trust in this type of scenario might really be a fantastic idea. You can either allow for shortcut trusts to be in your initial trust and domain planning process, or it might be something that you could always add in later when the need arises. So you can really use it in either way. Does it really make that big of a difference, in the planning process? Well, it can. If you're putting it into your initial plan, you're probably putting in there saying, so let's go ahead and just put it into place so we don't have to worry about that issue happening. So it's really kind of up to you in terms of what you'd like to do with that. Let's talk about one more curveball kind of relationship that you might find yourself in. Let's talk about a realm trust. Let's say that you buy out or you partner with a company that has a Unix-based domain. Maybe it's a company full of Unix geeks and experts, and they say everything must be Linux or Unix or it doesn't get done. Well, we can still create trusts between a Windows domain like globalmantics.com and any Unix-based domain. It's what we call a Kerberos version 5 realm trust, or a lot of times you'll just see the word realm trust. But a realm trust can be one way or two way, and the realm trust can also be transitive, just so you know. Now this is really more like a two-way domain trust rather than a forest trust, just so you know. But basically, if we create a realm trust that is transitive, then we still get the same scenario. Sam can still share stuff with Bill. Bill can still share stuff with Sam. Sally can still share stuff with Dina, no matter where Dina may be. It's just that the authentication methodology and the trust type being a realm trust, we actually are using Kerberos to do the authentication. So here's what I want you to remember. If you see or hear anytime in your IT career that you're going to be joining forces with a Unix and Linux based company, you're going to automatically think realm trust. Okay, that's what you're going to think. That's what you absolutely have to know. All right, so let's talk about some rules of engagement, some stuff to remember when planning trusts. Should the trust be one-way or two-way? A good rule of thumb is always use the least amount of required access that is necessary. The next question is, will your authentication scope be domain-wide or selective? Let's talk about this for a little bit, and I have another screen capture up here on the screen here for you. If the domain that you are trusting is yours, if it's a buyout situation, then domain-wide authentication is kind of a no-brainer. Now, if the domain is not yours, that you're going to be creating a trust relationship with, you're going to be using selective authentication, in which Windows will not automatically authenticate users from the specified domain for any resources in the local domain. You have to specify which user you have to grant individual access to each server that you want to make available to users in the specified domain. This option is preferred if the domains belong to different organizations. So the rule of thumb is, if it's a buyout situation, you can go ahead and use domain-wide authentication. If it is not, if it's just a partnership and it will eventually dissolve, and that domain is owned by another organization, go ahead and use selective authentication instead. Now I want to talk to you about one more key guideline when it comes to joining domains, and this is kind of a new thing. It's called SID filtering. And of course, SID stands for Security ID. Now, what SID filtering does is it prevents a rogue administrator from another domain from granting an account full admin privileges in another trusted domain. So this is really a security feature, and it's really easy to turn on or turn off. This particular feature, I want to go back and reiterate, this is not necessary if you're going to be buying out another company, unless, of course, you have massive, crazy security requirements. If you are partnering with another company, however, SID filtering is a useful way to help go that extra step to protect your particular network from getting infiltrated by someone who in a trusted domain. This little trick using a little attribute of Active Directory, I can actually grant another account or even myself at full administrative privilege access to your network. You can actually prevent that altogether using the SID filtering technique. Now, SID filtering, I just want to give you a quick reference. It's actually enabled or disabled at the command line. It's a one-line configuration kind of thing. And I'll give you the command line reference up here, but let me give you a quick example. Let's say that you wanted to turn on SID filtering for the Globomantics domain in order to prevent somebody from Verde Petra from giving an account full permissions in Globomantics. What you would do is you would open up a command line prompt on the Globomantics domain controller, and you would type this: netdom trust globomantics.com/domain:verdepetra.com/quarantine yes. And let me go ahead and get my pen back out here. Quarantine yes, this is really the key line that makes everything work. This is what turns SID filtering on or off. Then you follow that up by /userd:/supercoach, or whatever your administrator password is, /password, and then whatever your password for that particular account is. In order to turn off SID filtering, it's pretty much the exact same thing. The only real difference is that you would set the quarantine switch set to no. So you see, it's a one-line configuration command, and you can either turn it on or turn it off. That's pretty much it. That's all you really need to do for SID filtering. And again, it's just to give you that one extra step of security to make sure that someone from another trusted domain doesn't get access that they shouldn't have. All right, so let's talk about the Verde Petra buyout plan, and let's take everything that we've talked about and start combining it together now. Hank's been out shopping again, and he just bought a medium-sized security brokerage firm in Japan. verdepetra.com, which by the way means green rock, and that's actually in Spanish and Greek, Spanish being Verde and Petra being Greek. So it's not Japanese, but anyway, moving on. You get the wonderful task of building the foundation for users in Japan and in the U.S. offices to be able to share information now that Verde Petra employees are technically Globomantics employees. So there's going to be files and folders and probably printers that you're going to need to be able to share across the two, literally continents, because it's quite a ways. But before you can provide sharing permissions, what you need to do is you need to plan out how those two domains are going to be able to trust each other. So here is what the plan is. First of all, we're going to create a forest trust with forest-wide authentication. You're going to see this coming up in our demonstration here. Forest-wide authentication is the same thing as domain-wide authentication. The only difference is for the entire forest. Since Verde Petra employees are now Globomantics employees, forest-wide authentication is going to be A-OK. Or even if we want to do domain-wide authentication, that would be okay too. Now, no SID filtering is going to be necessary, and that's because, again, even though we have two separate domains, they are now part of the same company underneath the same authority. So we don't have to worry so much about somebody from Verde Petra granting full admin access over here to Globomantics, because the administrators in Verde Petra are really going to be, employees of Globomantics. So anyway, I think you've got the point, right? I've kind of beat that horse to death. But in terms of the child domains, na.globomantics.com, which is Chicago, and sw.globomantics.com, which is in Dallas, in order to be able to make sure we can share information quickly and easily, we're just going to put a shortcut trust directly into our initial domain trust plan. I'm sorry, I really should say forest trust plan, shouldn't I? The shortcut trust, even though we have a forest trust, and that means that it is automatically transitive, sw.globomantics automatically trusts tk.verdepetra.com. Because the forest trust is going to be transitive, we're still going to go ahead and build in a shortcut trust between these two domains, as well as na.globomantics.com and tk.verdepetra.com. We're going to go ahead and just build those in right from the outset in our plan to make sure that our users have a good experience when trying to access shared folders or even shared printers or whatever other devices may be between the two domains. We want to make sure they can get access to them quickly and easily. So that's our initial plan. What I'd like to do now is I'd like to actually move over to two virtual servers and show you how we would create this part of the plan right here. We're going to create a forest trust with forest-wide authentication. Now, no SID filtering is going to be necessary in this implementation. So you already know how to do that. You open up a command line prompt and you just type in what I showed you on the screen just a little bit earlier. And if it's successful, it'll say the command completed successfully. You won't really see anything, but you will get an acknowledgement that SID filtering has been turned on or turned off successfully. Okay, so let's go ahead and move on over to the servers and let me show you the process of creating this portion of our plan. Alright, so you see we're over here on DC1 for verdepetra, and we can really do this operation from either domain controller. I thought I'd come over here and well, quite frankly, because it was the first virtual machine up on my screen. So, all right, let's go to the Start menu, and we're going to go to Administrative Tools, and to get to Trusts, we don't really get to it from the Server Manager. It's one of the very few things that is not readily available here. Instead, we have to go to the Domains and Trusts MMC, and we'll start from here. So I'm going to right-click here on verdepetra. We'll go into its properties and into Trusts. Now we're going to go into the New Trust Wizard, and it's going to walk us through the steps to create the new trust. Now, I should probably mention to you that your DNS servers need to be able to find the other domain controllers, so make sure that you have DNS entries either put in or maybe even specify a DNS server over in the other domain as an active DNS server that's used here as well. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and tell it next, and now I just simply put in the domain that I want to connect to, or trust, globomantics.com, and now I'm going to specify which of these I'm going to select. Now, if you want to do either non-transitive trusts or one-way trusts, either incoming or outgoing, you would select external trust. Now, I'm going to be using forest trust here, and I'm going to tell it next. Now, we get to select which direction do we want to select for the trust. Now, this is a forest trust, and we know it's going to be two-way, so we're all good here. We'll tell it next, and now we can create the trust for the following, either only for this domain, or we can do both domains at the same time if we have credentials that we can put in for the other domain. And well, it just so happens that I do, so I'm going to go ahead and create the trust in both domains right now. So I'm going to go ahead and put in supercoach here into this one and put in the password and tell it next. Now, I get to decide whether I'm going to do forest-wide authentication or selective authentication, but I need you to note here that we have the select the scope of authentication for users from the Globomantics forest, okay? Well, Globomantics is the umbrella corporation, if you will, for this venture, so we'll go ahead and we'll do forest-wide authentication for Globomantics. Now we have to select the scope of authentication for users from the local forest, i.e. verdepetra. So we're going to specify forest-wide authentication for this one as well, and we'll tell it next. And now here is what our settings are, blah, blah, blah. Yes, that's very nice. We're going to tell it next. Now it's going to make the trust changes, and go ahead and we're going to configure the trust. We'll tell it next. Do we want to confirm the outgoing trust? Sure we do. Let's go ahead and confirm it. Do we want to confirm the incoming trust? Yes, because quite frankly, when you do a two-way trust, what you're really doing is creating an incoming and outgoing trust at the same time. So we'll tell it next and finish. Bam, that's all there was to it. All right, it's just a wizard, and you see now that we now have a trust with Globomantics, both incoming and outgoing. I'm going to tell it OK. Next, let's go over to NYDC1 for Globomantics, and let's see if the trust was created over there as well. All right, so here I am over on DC1 at globomantics.com this time, and I'm going to go to the Start menu, Administrative Tools, and to Active Directory Domains and Trusts. And we're going to see what we have by right-clicking on globomantics.com going into its properties and going to trusts. And well, would you look at that? Here's the domain name, verdepetra.com, trust type forest, transitive, yes. And we have the same thing down here in the incoming trusts as well. So our two forests are now connected via this trust relationship. We're going to tell it OK, and we're going to close out of the Active Directory Domains and Trusts MMC. And now let's bounce back on over to verdepetra.com and let's see if we can actually share information to one of the users over here in Globomantics. So let's see who we have over here in Globomantics. And just so you know, I don't have a lot of users in this one, just a couple for testing. So let's see here. Let's do Jay Patel, and let's open him up. And let's go to account. So it's spatel@globomantics.com. All right, so let's go ahead and bounce on over to verdepetra and see if we can provide access to Jay on a file folder over in that domain. All right, back over here on verdepetra DC1. Let's go ahead and let's minimize our server manager, and we'll close out of our Active Directory Domains and Trusts. Let's go to the Start menu and to Computer. Let's go to the C drive, and let's see here, VP Human Resources. I think that's a good one. We'll try to share that with S. Patel. So we'll click on Share, and what I'm going to do here is I'm going to put in the domain that the user lives in, and we'll put in his login name, and let's go ahead and see if we can add S. Patel. And there we go. All right, so we are talking back and forth now to globomantics.com. This is good news. So do we want to provide Jay with reader level, contributor level, co-owner? Let's go ahead and do contributor, and we'll click on share. And it's going to take just a minute. All right, we're all done there. That was fast. We'll tell it done. Now let's go back and let's right click on VP Human Resources. Let's just double check. I want to take you into the security tab real quick so you can see that Jay does in fact have permissions on this particular folder. And that's all there is to it. So when creating a forest trust, or really any kind of trust, you go to that MMC, run the wizard, and then after that you are now able to provide permissions to shared resources like folders or printers or anything else that you have out there that you need to share. All right, let's go back now over to our slides and let's just do some quick wrap up. All right, so after watching this video, you should be able to describe the different kinds of trusts that are available, and you should be able to plan a trust implementation based upon whatever requirements get handed to you from the powers that be. You should be able to create a two-way trust with forest-wide authentication, which I've just shown you, and also you should be able to share a file folder across domains, and I've just shown you how to do that as well. All right, well that wraps up this video. I'll see you in the next one.